This is Press Pass, your all-access pass to an extra Meet the Press conversation.
This week on Press Pass, breaking the political gridlock that consumes Congress all too often. It's a bipartisan approach by two political veterans who offer their insights in a new book, The Partisan Divide, Congress in Crisis. I'm joined by two of the authors, former Congressman Martin Frost, a Democrat from Texas, and Tom Davis, a Republican from Virginia. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. All right, the issue of gridlock and partisan divide, it is actually now the number one concern. Now that the economy seems to be coming back, when you talk to collectively voters, what does Washington need to work on? First thing is breaking the gridlock. You're obviously trying to offer up a recipe. Is that the purpose of this book? Is what?
Well, we want to describe how this came about. This wasn't happenstance. You've had three macro trends over the last 15, 20 years that have emerged that have really caused this. You still have a lot of good people that want to do the right thing, but they're just really not allowed to by the rules of the game. Single-party districts, media polarization models, and growth of the internet, and, of course, campaign finance, where the money's moved from the parties out to the wings.
And, Chuck, you know that you were the one who first put Tom and me together on your show about 5 years ago. And Tom and I have done a lot of commentary since then. And during the course of time, we realized that we saw things pretty much the same way in terms of the institution. And we wanted to write a book, but neither one of us could do it by ourselves. So collectively, jointly, we were able to write a book, and we think we did a pretty good job.
I was just going to say, it's a very thorough, it's more of an explanation. Some of it, you know, people are going to say, well, yes, we knew this about partisanship is you know, the two parties have become more polarizing even within their own parties, and gerrymandering is an issue. The media and the sort of the new social media way of doing everything ideologically. If a new member of Congress is reading this, what do you hope they get out of it?
Well, I hope they will at least think a little bit and realize that this could be a better institution and that there are some ways to address the problems. Now, the problem, of course, the issue is whether Congress will ever pass anything to cure these problems. Maybe they won't until the public demands it. Maybe there'll have to be some even greater crisis than we've seen before. Congress has the power to require states to use nonpartisan or bipartisan districts. Redistricting, to appoint panels that are bipartisan to draw these districts. Whether Congress would ever pass that kind of legislation is another thing. Congress has the power to require these C4 groups to disclose all their donors. They haven't done it so far.
All right, you both come from this center out a little bit. You know, center-left guy from Texas, center-right guy from the Mid-Atlantic, hard to say, a southern state. I don't, you know, Virginia, your district, much more Mid-Atlantic than we would call the Deep South. Is that what you think is, see, that's what comes across in the book, is that essentially you think, where have all the centrists gone?
They're gone.
Well, they're dormant. They're looking for an opportunity to get compromised, but the political rewards are not there, because for 80% of the House members, 80%, the only race that matters is the primary. The general election is just a constitutional formality. So everything is pulled toward that narrow slice of ideological voters that dominate primaries. And that's who they have to please, and they frown on compromise. Yeah,
it's because primaries are low turnout, and a strongly committed ideological group can carry a primary either on the Democratic or Republican side. Not that that many people lose in primaries. You don't still have a lot of congressmen or senators lose in primaries, but they all live in mortal fear that they could be defeated in a primary, so that alters their voting record, pushes them toward the extremes, make them unwilling to cross the party aisle or try and work on constructive solutions.
Now, one of the extinct species is the Southern Democrat. Sitting in Congress,
white Southern Democrat. Voting Rights Act is a huge culprit there.
Tom and I disagree on the specifics of that.
But what I thought was interesting is you don't bring up, not only is the Southern conservative Democrat extinct, the New England moderate Republican and the Midwestern moderate Republican is extinct too.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, both went extinct. Isn't that why the center's gone?
That's correct. And again, it's shifted to primaries because even in the Midwest, you have safe Republican seats where they focus on the primary.
All you have to do is look at what happened in Kansas last year with Pat Roberts. Pat Roberts just had a Tea Party opponent, a very strong Tea Party opponent, as it turned out, and Pat went hard far right in his voting record. In the past, Pat had worked with Democrats on some issues. He tried to be constructive where he could be. He went hard right, and he won the primary.
He was actually, I think, a pretty weak opponent, but it shows how strong.
Right. But the fact that he was identified with the Tea Party, and the Tea Party was strong.
Those forces are strong.
And so Pat had no choice but to move hard right. Now, there are people in my state in Texas, Republicans in my state, who are, I think, pretty reasonable people and who would like to work with Democrats, but they live in mortal fear that somebody's going to run against them in the primary.
All right, you identify many culprits, gerrymandering, money, you both have talked about. So which is the more evildoer here? Is it the money and the power of the interest groups have? Or is it the gerrymandering that sort of rewards this power to the interest?
Well, it's also media models.
And
basically, they've got a polarization model. It's a successful business model.
Right. Talk radio, on the right, it's talk radio, which feeds social media, cable, and the internet. Right.
Yeah.
All work together.
It's the fact that all three of these have come together that make it combustible. We never had it like this in the past, but they've come together, and that makes it combustible. If it were just one factor, I think could be overcome by just...
You can't dramatically change the campaign finance situation because of the Supreme Court. You could require disclosure, but nothing else. If you could do nothing other than just require bipartisan commissions to draw congressional districts and have more competitive districts, that would be the single greatest thing
it would, but
do
remember,
right
residential sorting patterns play a huge role in these single-party districts, as does the voting rights Act.
All right, we're going to hit the pause button here. And you're not in your entirely. We will pick up after the break. We'll have more here. Martin Frost, Tom Davis, in just a moment. Back now with former Congressman Martin Frost and Tom Davis on their new book, The Partisan Divide, Congress in Crisis. Martin Frost, you were just, you wanted to bring up a little bit more about the role that the media plays in this polarization.
Yeah, I started off as a reporter. I have a journalism degree from the University of Missouri. I worked as a newspaper, a radio, and a television reporter before I went to law school and got in politics. I am for freedom of the press. I am not for us trying to censor what the right wing can say or the left wing can say in our media. But we have to understand the effect of all this, of how this plays out and our new media and the effect that has on polarization. I wouldn't try and change that, but we have to understand.
Well, I was just going to say, an advocacy media is something, I know you're a huge student of history. 19th century, I mean, there's a newspaper called the Arkansas Democrat Gazette.
Yes.
All right, there's a newspaper in Tallahassee called the Tallahassee Democrat.
Yeah.
It's because back in the day, the Arkansas Democrat was the Democrat paper in Arkansas. The Arkansas Gazette, I believe, was the Republican paper. That's the way media worked in the 19th century.
You know, when the equal time doctrine went away, though, your TV started changing in terms of the business models. You didn't have to show both sides, and people found out this is a pretty good business model. We're not advocating going back to that, but I think we need to be aware of that role.
Also, with the internet, now you don't have editors in all cases, and so much material is out there on the internet which may or may not be true. I have right-wing cousins in Texas who used to send me things off the internet. Isn't this terrible about Congress? And I would.
And by the way, it would be terrible if it was true.
Yeah, that's right. I had to write them back and say, no, look, you understand that's not exactly true, and let me tell you what the truth is. But we have to understand the system, and we have to live with the system we have.
All right, we talked about all of the things that get members of Congress there. But the Congress itself and how it works is broken. I'm of the theory that leadership is too powerful and committee chairs are too weak. That is a giant change from 20 years ago when you guys were running.
Even though I was a strong committee chairman, we went ahead and did steroids and a lot of other uses. We've devolved into a parliamentary system when you really think about it, even though it's a balance of power structure, where the president's party in Congress is an appendage of the president. It's not an independent body anymore, and that has a lot to do with it. If you want to move that work product through, you got to stop the committees, go right through leadership, and that's how it's involved.
I gave a speech at my alma mater, the University of Missouri, right after Nancy Pelosi became Speaker, and the topic of my speech was Pelosi and Gingrich, two peas in a pod. They both believe in strong leadership coming out of the Speaker's office and not necessarily strong committees.
And the Senate's being run this way as well. I mean, committee chairs don't have, and I wonder, does that drive people away from even wanting to be in Congress?
Oh, absolutely. You look at who the retirements are sometimes. You say who's retiring, it's kind of the wrong people.
It's the people you wish would stay in there.
Right.
It's the people who were the deal makers who worked on the other side of the issue.
But these are absolutely run partisan institutions. The House is majority rule. Instead of being the minority party now, the Democrats are the opposition party, where they're the minority and vice versa. Opposition party is no to everything. Minority party is a minority shareholder in government.
And this can get changed very easily. Right? Leadership can change this,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, it takes the right people in leadership, Chuck. I'm not so sure it can be changed easily at this point. One of the things that Tom and I recommend is that you have a national primary day where all the primaries are on the same day so that there's more media attention and so that you have higher turnout. If you have higher turnout in primaries, you have a more diverse group of people voting, and maybe you don't have people that are so much driven to the extremes. The leadership has to deal with people on the extremes or who are threatened by the extremes in their own party.
A lot of independent. Look at the 25 votes against Boehner in the House caucus. So strong leadership doesn't have the flexibility they'd like.
Right. One of the more astute observations in here that is sort of like, it's almost incongruous, right, which is this idea the rise of polarization is coming simultaneously with the rise of people calling themselves independent, not a member of either party. The rise of independent that rising independent doesn't participate in the process.
That's correct.
They're not voting in a primary in most
they
states.
don't vote
not
in
in most states. Some states they can, but not in most.
And also the polarization, even in states, only 4 states was the presidential election decided within 5 points. These states through residential
4
sorting.
states. That's unbelievable, right? Our quote swing states. There really are only 4 of them that do this, right? Virginia, Florida, North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean that's where it goes.
And I think Ohio. Yeah, those are the only 4 that were by less than 5 points, right? That's unbelievable.
So that's residential sorting patterns, as we've seen.
I want to go back to one point because this is one area where Tom and I have somewhat of a disagreement, and that's the effect of the Voting Rights Act. I think the Voting Rights Act was long overdue. You had large parts of the South that didn't have any black congressmen at all. So the Voting Rights passed, gave blacks...
Let me pause you here. It was really more of a bigger problem on the local level. It was local elected officials that African Americans couldn't get elected to any position.
There were 4, I've forgotten, we put in the book the number of states, southern states, that prior to 1992 didn't have a single black member of Congress, even though they had a large
30,
black
40,
population.
or 40%.
Now, here's what happened, though. This did not have to be the result that you wound up with black districts and white districts in the South, white Republican districts. The Republicans were very shrewd in what they did. They made common ground with some people in the black community who said, let's pack these districts. Let's give you a nice, safe district.
You use this. The Bush Justice Department in 1991 and the Congressional Black Caucus basically ended the Democratic Party's stranglehold on the House of Representatives, right?
In the end result,
but there's somebody else other than the 2 people you mentioned. Ben Ginsburg, who was the attorney and the driving force for the Republican National Committee, was very shrewdly put together coalitions state by state so that as blacks were packed into a relatively small number of districts and all the surrounding districts were bleached. That didn't have to be the case. John Lewis and some other people in the black community said, don't do that. Keep
Still
black...
a Democratic campaign chairman.
No, but it's true. It's absolutely true.
No, I mean, it did flip it, right?
It did, but that's correct. And now they want a lower percentage because they want to maximize it.
The book is absolutely for anybody that cares, whether you care about money in politics, gerrymandering, the problem of how Congress works internally. You guys answer every one of these questions very thoroughly. Congratulations.
Thank you
for having us.